But you were a fan growing up of professional wrestling. What was it about professional wrestling that got you interested?
My father brought me to a show at the War Memorial right around that time, and I think that that's kind of when I got hooked. It's and back then it was just a lot more it just seemed a lot more real when you were a kid, and everything was larger than life, and there wasn't the internet, and there wasn't any smart fans, and it wasn't, there wasn't any sort of rhetoric around what was happening in the match. You went there to be entertained. And so growing up and being into sports and also being into entertainment, I mean, I used to love watching the Olympics, like all of those big shows. Wrestling just kind of drew me in with those characters, and just that, like I said, that larger than life, like personas, and I just loved it. So it is something that my brother and I watched. And we used to have Royal Rumble parties with my family. During the Royal Rumble, we would all get together and order it on pay-per-view at the time, or if we got a scrambler, we could unscramble. I don't know. You look pretty young. You probably don't remember the scramblers. You
No.
have no idea what I'm talking about, do you?
No.
So way back then, you could order pay-per-view, or you could get a cheat box and you attach the cheat box through your cable and it'll
Oh,
unscramble certain
interesting.
channels. And sometimes it was wrestling, and when you got a little bit older, it would unscramble some of the naughty channels that they had on
Yes.
TV at the time. So, but we would have the Royal Rumble parties. I remember we would go to my aunt's house. This is when Survivor Series was on Thanksgiving. I don't think it is anymore, but we would go to my aunt and uncle's house every Thanksgiving, and we'd watch Survivor Series. So my whole family was into wrestling, which was really cool when I became a wrestler. I remember we did a show in Binghamton, and pretty much my entire family came. I never got to do a show in Syracuse. It's one of my regrets, because I know that would have been probably the only time that Muhammad Hassan would have gotten a pop, like
Yeah.
a babyface pop is in Syracuse. I had so many friends and family around.
Like
Uh,
Bret Hart 97 almost.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, I loved wrestling, and I loved wrestling all. I got away from it for a little while, and I was really more into sports. And then when I went to college, some of my friends and my roommate was huge into wrestling, and that got me back in. It was during the Rock and Austin era, and I mean, how could you not be drawn in? And that was
No.
like new Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, is watching the Rock and Steve Austin and Triple H. And so I got back into wrestling big time, and it wasn't until I was probably about 20 that I was like, man, I want to try this as a career. And that was just kind of how I made my decision. I just loved watching it. I loved the entertainment aspect of it. To me, it grew up with me. Wrestling went from being comic-y and caricatures to, when I was a kid watching the Junkyard Dog and, like I said, Hulk Hogan, to now being so like cool, with Steve Austin, The Rock, and all those guys.
Were you a big fan of the heels or were you more a fan of the good guys?
I liked who I liked. It didn't matter if they were a heel or a face. My roommate that I lived with in college was what you would say is a smart fan. Like he knew a lot about wrestling, and he actually taught me a lot more about the backstage stuff. And he had known a lot more than I did at the time. So I like The Rock. Rock is, I'm so pretty much all I wear is Project Rock gear. I get
Yeah.
called out on it, but I love the clothing. But I also think The Rock is one of the most iconic wrestlers from my generation. So I didn't care if you were babyface or heel. If you were a great character and it was entertaining to watch, then I loved watching you.
What was it about The Rock to you that made you go, "Man, I could be like that guy"?
Well, I can't be like The Rock. I wish I could be like The Rock, but as far as inspiring me to become a wrestler, I actually met him in Buffalo. I don't think he would ever remember this, but he was training at a Gold's Gym in Buffalo, and that's where I trained. I went to school at the University of Buffalo, and he came in, and I just tried to not bother him, but I was just watching how he worked out, which he's always been intense, But I mean, you look at The Rock's workouts now, and it's funny because I still do the same thing. Whenever The Rock puts out a video on Instagram, I watch him because his technique is so flawless. Like everything he does that's how I do it now. Like I don't crush weights, I go slow and controlled, and count the negative, explode. But so he was at the Shake Bar Golds 20 something years ago. And I just went up and started talking to him. And he was so cool and personable and just warm and friendly. And he didn't have to be. And I think that that was one of the reasons why I became a huge fan. And if you ever hear anybody talk about how The Rock was backstage, I mean, that's why he is who he is because of how he treats people. And then he gets out there and he's just this character. I mean, he is just so entertaining to watch and charismatic that no matter what he's doing, you just can't take your eyes off of him. So first promo I ever did in OVW when I was Mark Magnus and I joined the Revolution, where I was wearing leather pants and the stud belts, and I remember coming back after that promo and everybody was just kind of looking at me, and I had no idea. Like, I thought I did something wrong. Did I steal something from someone? And it wasn't until, a little while later when I'd asked one of the guys in the back, they're like, we didn't know you could cut a promo like that. And that was like my first ever like live in front of people promo. And I remember going out there just thinking, listen, man, you can go out there and be shy and be careful and you're gonna fail. Or you can just say screw it and go out there and try to do your best impression of The Rock, and at least you have a chance at looking good. And I went out there and I tried to do my best impression of The Rock, and it came out well. So I think those interactions and that encounter in Buffalo just really kind of solidified to me who my idol was in professional wrestling. And a lot of what I did, even though I played a completely different character, was really trying to emulate The Rock.
Yeah.